Got myself.
Uh, Welcome to the Sunday Superversive Livestream for August 26th, 2018. On the eve of DragonCon, I am with... there we go. I'm with Chrome Oxide, writer of a story that made it into Forbidden Thoughts. And I had it up here. There it is. Graduation Day, a glimpse of the state-run education to come. And 28 Minutes into the Future, a collection of stories by Chrome Oxide. Chrome, is there anything I'm missing from your literary bio?
One of the stories in here, Cop for Day, was published finalist in Writers of the Future, Volume 29.
Ooh, very nice. I probably should have put something in there for that. So tell us about this new book of yours, 28 Minutes into the Future.
Okay, this is a collection of humorous science fiction and fantasy satirical stories that has a libertarian mindset. So what we've got is a lot of funny things happening in a rather serious situation. So it's something that I think a lot of libertarians and the conservative libertarian folks will like, because I'm poking fun at the left and all the things that they hold sacred.
I do like poking fun at the left. So let's see here. So what's the cover about? Is the cover in your story?
The cover is one of the stories. It's about a vampire who happens to be walking down the street one night and sees a blood bank with a sign called Vampire Free Zone in the window. So he goes in to find out what it's all about. And he has a conversation with the receptionist by the name of Sunshine.
All right. And I guess it's a blood bank. Yep, I dig it. So what was your favorite story to write for this collection?
It would have to be the first one, Cop for a Day, because that's actually one of the first stories I ever wrote. As a writer who only started about 6 or 7 years ago, one of the first stories I wrote, I sent off to a book publisher who was putting together a collection. And after a year, they rejected the story. It made it through 3 passes, and on the 4th pass, they decided it wasn't exactly what they were looking for. So at that point, I looked around and said, you know what? I don't want to wait a year for a rejection. Let me find someone that rejects quicker. So I sent it to Writers of the Future. And they did not reject it.
Oh, my.
Yes. What I am is what's called a published finalist. So Writers of the Future has a quarterly contest, an annual contest, and then at the end of the year, they print a book with all the winning stories, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place, as well as a grand prize. And then the editor gets to look at the whole year and see what story, if any, he thinks is deserving. And he chose mine to put into the book.
I like it. That's high praise, I guess. I've never actually read their publication, but I'm glad you made it that far. So,
continue.
Okay. So you came onto my radar, at least, with your contribution to Forbidden Thoughts. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and how does it, is it a representation of your work as a whole, and how you view yourself as a writer, not in the sense of that you are a character, but in the sense of how you wrote the story, and what got you interested in writing Forbidden Thoughts?
It's as good a representation of any of what I try and do. What I try and do is portray, as the cover of the book says, 28 minutes into the future. What I try and do is portray current leftist policies, how they would end up being in the future. And then I try and make them not just silly, but put in elements of humor so that it works at multiple levels. And Forbidden Thoughts actually was a quirk. I write politically charged stories when I'm not writing just straight out funny stories. And so what happened was I wrote that story, and a couple of people in my writers group refused to read it. They read a couple of paragraphs and said, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I can't critique it. And the responses were so negative, I sent it off to a couple of friends. One of them told me, hey, I heard about a collection that might be interested, and that was Forbidden Thoughts. So even though I was not asked to join, when I sent the story into them after getting a introduction, Jason decided to include it in with the book.
Excellent. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Let's see here. So, I'm just pulling up a list of your short stories inside 28 minutes into the future. Let's see. It says, was there ever a time the world needed to laugh more than it does right now? Thankfully, the cavalry has arrived. 9 rib-tickling, irreverent, relevant stories, short stories take aim at political correctness and blow to smithereens in a hail of hilarity. Oh, wait, that's not a list. It's just praise for your book. I found myself laughing with his tales over and over. Entertaining, pure and simple, a welcome breath of fresh air in an increasingly stuffy room by Dave Truesdale, who is a friend of mine. And it's terribly hard to write political commentary with such a strong sense of irony. The late, great Jerry Pournelle, and a list of awards for Jerry Pournelle longer than my arm. So this is high praise.
Yes.
Out of curiosity, was Dave Truesdale the one who introduced you to Jason Rennie?
Yes, he is.
He's a good guy.
Contacted me after my Cop for Days story in Writers of the Future because he saw potential in it that evidently a lot of other people didn't see, which is the libertarian freedom perspective. And so we had been communicating off and on over the years. And this one story, I really liked it. And I couldn't understand why everybody in my group hated it so much. So I sent it to a couple of people. One friend that I sent it to, who is conservative, right-wing, said she fell out of her chair laughing so hard when she read it. And when I sent it to Dave, he was the one that said he knew someone who would publish it. And he introduced me to Jason, and it just went from there.
Excellent. So, let's see. I've seen irony mentioned in reference to your humor. I've seen in your contribution to Forbidden Thoughts that you play your humor in a straight face. Is that your ideal form of humor?
For the most part, I sometimes write just straight humorous stuff. In which case, I'm all over the map. Anytime that I can find a joke that's funny, if I can work it into a story, I will. With the political stuff, I'm a little bit more pointed in terms of trying to focus in on a specific theme or subject I'm trying to make a point about. But in some of my funnier stuff, it's some of my non-political stuff, I'm just trying to go for the humor. High, low, in between, puns, malprops. I mean, you name it. If I can come up with something, I will try and use it.
Very good. And let's see here. So I know that satire has been, I think, a much maligned way of political commentary, except by probably political cartoonists. Assuming, of course, they're honest political cartoonists, of which I assume there's only 3, of which I can only name 1, just in case. So, do you think your work runs more in the satirical side of things?
It's kind of half and half. When I hear the news and I hear the slanted fake news that the left promotes, I get upset, and then I write stories like the ones in here. Other times I just come up with the concept that I think is so funny that I have to do something with it. And then I kind of struggle to come up with something to make it work. And hopefully at some point I'll have a collection of non-satirical stories that are just straight funny. But that's one of my future plans. I'm also working on a novel that's just straight humorous as well, that I'm hoping to get out in the near future also. But this collection is all political satire, and there's a lot of different things going on. Depending upon how knowledgeable you are about the political scene, some of the stuff may pass you by, but I think there's enough stuff that you will understand it. So, for instance, in the story Vampire Free Zone, the vampire is talking with the receptionist, and she's saying, well, the Vampire Free Zone sign works so well, I'm making up a gun-free zone sign to add to the window.
All right. And of course, the vampire's standing right there in front of her. And I'm
Yes.
sure, of course, is it obvious that he's a vampire?
No, it's not obvious.
Oh, what are you from? The Halloween? Whatever. You're the. I'm afraid humor isn't one of my strongest suits when it comes to writing. Though I'm told I am very, very, very dry. Let's see.
To continue on with that one, the receptionist's name is Sunshine, so the story ends with the vampire wondering how much sunshine he can take.
That is pretty funny.
Okay, so that's the kind of stuff I do. I've got a lot of stuff that's really overt, and then some which is a little bit more covert, but enough so that there'll be something, no matter what your background, there'll be something you can find to laugh about.
I love it, and I do love that sort of humor. Let's see. In your Forbidden Thoughts, it was very playing it straight with the what the liberals desire and all that jazz, with their gulags and everything like that. And much of the humor was the characters also playing it straight. But it's so madcap and strange and illogical and all that jazz, but you can't help but laugh at it, even though they're pulling guns and it's like, I'm not a white woman at all. I'm a polyamorous, demi-queer Eskimo kin, or whatever you said it was. Actually, I think I could probably find it.
Right. In that one, I played it a little bit more straight in terms of not as many jokes, but I was making the left so over the top that these are all the things that claim that this is reality. So I just combined them all together.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. I just think, okay. My daughter looked around and whispered, "Today I'm self-identifying as a gay black male." White males are prohibited from self-identifying as anything other than themselves because of their white privilege and defective DNA. Do be careful about cultural appropriation. I will. They hugged each other without asking for permission. I shivered. If a white man hugged any female without written consent, he would be rightfully arrested and charged with rape. After they separated and wiped tears from their eyes, an official gulag delivery drone paused in front of my daughter. I dropped a note and participation trophy into her hands along with a gun. I zoomed in on the gun. Use this gun to eliminate white privilege by eliminating all whites. Congratulations. This trophy honors your occasional presence on campus while enrolled in the 8-year course of study of the evils of crush white oppressors. So on and so forth. And I did find that funny in a very wry way. And of course, it's quite pointed, quite explicit. But I felt that it was one of the strongest entries in Forbidden Thoughts. Though I wouldn't dare explicitly rank them because I am deathly allergic to internet drama. Not really. Not at all. But let's see here.
But the thing is, I've actually heard feminists and other people on the left stating all those things today.
Yes.
But just not all in the same story. So I'm just combining everything into and saying, this is, if you put all this together, it's insane. But this is what they do. So I'm just saying, well, this is what you want. So I'm just going to give it back to you in a way that you may not particularly care for.
And that's, of course, perfectly reasonable with what's happening in South Africa and the soon-to-be probable genocide of the white farmers, the Afrikaners, and the English. It is becoming more real every day. However, I don't think they'll nearly go as quietly as they're anticipating. Though I do have high hopes that Trump and Putin and others will take in the refugees. But that's too serious for this live stream. Though very true. I do think that I do love slapstick. I grew up on the Three Stooges and other things like that. Even though I am also very fond of British humor, not the sitcom so much, except for Keeping Up Appearances and various offshoots of that. But of certain cartoons that they had, not the political ones, but the just sort of humor of daily life. Ronald Searle and I could search my library for it, but I will not for the sake of time. What sort of influences do you have for your humor? What do you crack open to reassess what you're writing?
Humor has actually been a long time fascination of mine. When I was younger, I used to watch a lot of sitcoms, listen to comedy records. Anything where someone was cracking a joke, I would listen and I guess subconsciously try and understand what was going on, because humor has always fascinated me. So when I first started writing, it seems like everything I do, something comes out funny, and I just kind of accepted it. But when you talk about humor, I mean, I've enjoyed listening to The Goon Show, as well as a few other different British radio comedies, as well as a lot of different American shows, Barsign Theater, Credibility Gap. There's a number of different sources of humor, including just, straight over sitcoms where it's not political at all, but just funny, where they're coming up with one-liners and the people are joking back and forth with each other. So I cover the whole gamut, which is why my writing covers the whole gamut. Although, again, this is mostly political satire, but I still have a lot of humor shoehorned in.
Now, this is the real test. What do you think about The Big Bang Theory?
I watched it for a while back when I had TV. I had very mixed feelings about it. It seemed like they're making fun of those characters, and I wasn't completely comfortable with that. But there were occasionally humorous lines, so I put up with it for a while. And I actually live in kind of a wind tunnel, and once my antenna blew down, I made no effort to try and continue watching any other way.
That's pretty reasonable. If you ever are unlucky enough to see The Big Bang Theory, where someone has removed all the laugh tracks, it becomes very uncomfortable very quickly. Though weirdly funnier, because if you imagine them like in real life, he says his one-liner, and then everyone stands around for a second not laughing, in a very surreal sort of way. Let's see, I haven't read these short stories yet, but I do feel that since we're bringing up surrealism, that your Forbidden Thoughts thing was a little bit surreal because of how far you pushed the political satire. What do you have any opinions on surrealism and humor, or is that just not something you care to imbibe?
Graduation Day was actually a little bit more over the top than what I normally do. I normally try and focus a little bit more narrowly. I definitely use a shotgun approach in trying to put in a lot of things to mock, but I tend to focus a little bit more and make it a little bit more of a story, a little bit longer, make characters that you can care about. That one, for some reason at the time, I don't remember which news stories I was listening to, but I was just really upset, and I just had to write something to get it out of my system. But if you look at table of contents, you'll notice most of the other stories are substantially longer.
Forbidden Thoughts one was, I want to say, 4 pages, 5 pages. Not
Right.
very long at all on the as things are counted. Let's see. Oops, that's the wrong one. I'm trying to pull up your 28 minutes into the future because I own it. I should be able to pull up the table of contents.
Vampire Free Zone is short. The rest of them should be 20 to 30 pages long.
Excellent. I don't know if I can take this much humor.
Yeah. Read one a day, one a week.
Perhaps I'll learn something. So Cop for a Day seems to be the one you bring up the most. And you've got Graduation Day in here, Vampire Free Zone. So talk about Cop for a Day. Like what's the conceit in that one?
Okay. Cop for a Day is about, well, let me give you the elevator pitch. A humorous dystopian story about an ex-con who accidentally becomes a cop and is partnered with a judgmental artificial intelligence.
I like it. Have the human be the murderous sociopath instead of the robot, perhaps?
Neither one. What happens is the main character was arrested like 6 months prior, and he's just marking time till something happens, and then he gets called. He gets kind of drafted to become a cop because it's a job that nobody wants. And so when he goes down, he does end up becoming a cop for a day, and they give him a car that's got an artificial intelligence in it, and it's damaged, so he fixes it. And at one point, he's questioning the car, the intelligence, and trying to say, will you work with me? And at one point, it's like the artificial intelligence of the car is asking him what he got arrested for, because crimes being what they are, it's whatever a politician says a crime is, and it's not so much what you really do, but who you pissed off in the government. So the cop is annoyed that an artificial intelligence is trying to determine if he's moral enough to be a cop when the whole culture is corrupt. And in that particular story, I go hog wild with acronyms.
Ah, very nice.
So the story starts with him living in a simple living urban module. SLUM.
Yeah.
Okay. And
yeah.
Okay. And when he buys something to eat for his bicycle ride down to the cop station, I'm forgetting some of these already. It's been so long since I wrote it. But this whole thing takes place in the California Republic of Autonomous People, or CRAP for short. And there's a number of other acronyms in there that I'm just forgetting at the moment. But there's a number of acronyms throughout, along with a lot of other interesting situations that will bring chuckles. And one of the people that praised that, you saw Jerry Parnell was one of the judges of Rise of the Future, and David Farland, who is the head judge, both really liked the story. And David Farland's response was he started reading and started laughing, started reading and started laughing, and all of a sudden he was at the end of the story. And one of the reasons I refer to Cop for the Day a lot is because before or after I submitted and before I found out, everyone was telling me Rise of the Future never publishes humor. Well, it turns out it's not that they don't publish humor. They have difficulty finding stuff that they enjoy as humorous.
I gotcha. And humor is pretty, like, I think some things are universally funny, like pratfall or something. But right. It does, there is accounting for taste. By the way, I found some of your acronyms. Yes. Amalgamated Security Services.
Yes.
Government Regulated Uniform Edible Lumps.
Yes.
Lumps is just a funny word. And then there's one more, Sovereign Laborers and Valued Employees. I like it. If I ran a corporation, I'd put that in somewhere and didn't just let them go for it.
And the thing is, that's not the only thing I put in there. There's a number of different situations going on so that when you're reading it through, there's something. There's a lot of different somethings. It's not just one kind of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I strive for.
Yeah. I like it. Let's see here. Well, besides Caught for a Day and the ones we've mentioned so far, what other stories do you think are worth pointing out?
I'd like to point out Gateway, the final story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit less political than all the others. Elevator pitch, a humorous story about a redneck who accidentally calls tech support and gets a lot more than he expected.
I like it.
So that one, a redneck, his outhouse is being rezoned as a historical monument, so he's being evicted from his home.
Okay.
And then he goes through the procedure of trying to talk with government and gets blown off a couple of different times. And at one point, he opens his telephone, a cell phone, accidentally drops it, stumbles, and his hand lands on the number pad. Well, he gets a whole longer distance call than expected. So instead of getting Gateway Computers, he gets Gateway Universal Systems.
Mm-hmm.
So they do a remote upgrade of his computer because they have the best tech support in the galaxy.
Of course.
Of course. How he's now got a system, as a redneck, he's not super knowledgeable about computers, but he's got a computer that the longer he talks to it, the friendlier he becomes with it, to the point where he starts thinking of it as a friend. And so at one point he says, where can I go where the government won't harass me? And it says, well, no governments are currently in the asteroid belt. Here's the plans to build a device to get you out there.
All right.
And so he converts a bus to a spaceship and paints the stars and bars on all sides and takes off for the asteroid belt.
I like it.
And there's a number of other interesting things as well. At one point, I point out that he gets plenty of good eating from the wind turbines, which kill a lot of birds and endangered species.
I do wonder about that. That is funny. Because I've seen like whole wind farms and just like spinning in the breeze and stuff like that when I was driving through Minnesota, which is weirdly empty. Maybe not so weirdly, but I just saw those windmills turn around so much. I'm like, what are they doing to the ecosystem? Why haven't I seen a bird recently?
Well, as it turns out, I've seen at least one or two stories where they talk about birds flying right into those and getting, chopped up to pieces. So it may be good for, generating electricity. It's not so good for our flying feathered friends.
Yep. Let's see here. So you published with Superversive Press and Forbidden Thoughts. You were encouraged by the experience to publish with us again?
Yes. And in fact, Superversive Press is holding another story of mine for another feature anthology they're going to be putting out, but I don't have any release date on that.
What future anthology?
I don't have a whole lot of details on it. I just know there was a call for stories. I sent in something, and Jason said he liked it, and I'm waiting to hear back. So I don't want to talk about that too much at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. We actually have a lot of anthologies going on. I'm helming a soul anthology, which you are, of course, always welcome to contribute to, as is everyone else, because I am the last. It is the perfect deadline for it never comes due. So okay, that's actually quite reasonable. Well,
yeah. If you're looking for something to ask, one common question I get is, why chrome oxide?
Oh, go for it.
Okay. Back in August of 2000, one of my friends asked me to record a live album for him.
Mm-hmm.
I have a portable recording studio, and I use chromium dioxide cassettes, but I wanted something that flowed smoother, so I shortened chromium dioxide to chrome oxide. And I have a music-focused website, in addition to the writing stuff, And at this point, I've got about 20 Wikipedia links to my music site. So I figured if I'm already known as Chrome Oxide, it would make a good pen name. I don't have to worry about trying to promote myself from scratch. I've already got a little bit of recognition.
I like it. Have you been promoting your book to many of your music friends?
As a matter of fact, yes, I have. Uh, I spoke with 5 or 10 this weekend at 2 different live shows I was at, and a number of them said they're going to be buying it.
I like it. Let's see here. So since you write so much comedy, um, have you tried to enter the comedic scene like stand up or something like that yourself, or is that just not something you appreciate so much?
Funny you should mention that, because the last story I submitted to one of my critique groups, the person said, "Why are you writing? You should be a stand-up comic." So, so I never really thought of myself as a stand-up comic, but I have an interesting way with words and come up with a lot of different kinds of humor that, maybe I should think about this a little bit more for the future.
Mm-hmm. Have a very dry, plain style. Excuse me. That appeals to people, like sort of like I don't know, Bill Hicks maybe.
I don't know. The thing is, I come up with a lot of different jokes, but I don't always have any way to connect them. So, for instance, a couple of jokes I came up with recently that I'm not going to be putting in any stories is a couple of stoners are standing on a street corner. They've just popped a bunch of pills, and one is saying to the other, "What's happening? Nothing's happening." The other one says, "The rush is coming. The rush is coming."
I'm sorry. Could you what?
The rush is coming. The rush is coming. That's a wordplay on "the Russians are coming."
Okay. Okay.
Can I
I'm
go?
sorry.
Can I go a little bit more crass?
Go for it.
Okay. What happens when a Walking Dead? What do you get when a Walking Dead bites a prostitute? A fucking zombie.
Oh. Oh. Whoo. That's actually quite funny. That is a little. Well. I'm sorry. I'm not as good on command being told jokes to. Let me see. So I got something. So in one of my recent stories, I actually have you seen The Princess Bride?
Yes, I have.
So so you know the famous scene where he people are reacting to it. There we go. Where one of the characters who's more of an intellectual type, children are going after their father who's being held by the Elfin King. And so he set challenges out for them, each one challenge to each one. And so Edmund, who's the smart one, is up in a game of wits against an elf who's called Numenode. He's shaped like a giant toad. And the toad has set toad elf who has set 2 goblets before him. One, of course, has a sleeping draught, but the other one's okay. So Edmund has to figure it out. It's a very classic sort of scene. And they talk a bit about it, and he's riveting and stuff like that. And Edmund comes across this scheme, and so he goes, all right, you remind me of some of my favorite jokes. How about this? I'll choose it after I tell you. I'll choose which goblet after 3 jokes, and it's like okay, anything for the amusement. So he goes, a cowboy loses his favorite book while on the range. One day he looks down and a toad has it in his mouth. He takes it up by surprise and shouts, "It's a miracle!" The toad replies, "Not really. Your name is on the cover." A man goes to the movie. He sits and looks down and he sees that there's a toad next to him. He says, "I don't think toads went to the movies. How weird." The toad replies, It's not so weird. The book was great.
Yeah.
So an old man goes out fishing, and after a while, he hears a voice that says, "Pick me up. Pick me up." Well, he doesn't see anyone, so he thinks he just dreamed it up. Then he hears the voice again, "Pick me up." He looks around and he sees a toad on the pier next to him. "Are you talking to me?" he says. The toad replies, "Yep, I'm talking to you. Pick me up and kiss me, and I'll turn into the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. You'll have me as your bride, and every one of your friends will be jealous." The man looked at the toad and thought about it for a few minutes. Then he put the toad in his front pocket. The toad screamed, "What are you, nuts? Didn't you hear me? I said, kiss me and I'll be your beautiful bride." The old man looked down at the toad and said, "Nah, at my age, I'd rather have a talking toad."
Unfortunately, I've heard a number of variants of that joke a lot, so it doesn't come across as funny as some of the others.
Well, that's fine. But of course, at the end of it, I might change the arrangement then. In that case, what do you think? Short, long, short?
Short, long, short is good.
Excellent. I will make some arrangements. But of course, that gets the bump one down. I'm still editing the book, you see. So then, of course, Numenode is laughing, and he takes the opportunity to pick up the two goblets and dash them both in his open mouth.
Yeah.
And that, of course, wins him the contest because Numenode forgot to define who exactly was drinking. He merely said, "We will drink." And that, of course, is very important to the elves. So that's my attempts at humor. Thank you for your.
That works.
Yeah, I'm always looking for the people to look at it and tell me how I can do it better, because that's important in literature. So you've got a novel coming out. You've got some short stories running around. Are there any projects we can look forward to from you? Other projects?
Possibly another collection of short stories. These are the best and the ones that were closest to completion that we got through. I actually have been writing for like 5 or 6, 7 years. So I've got at least 2 to 3 times that many short stories. Maybe we can get another collection going in maybe a year or two. The novel is something that I'm really jazzed about. You mentioned, do I talk to my musician friends? I've spoken about the novel to hundreds of people at this point, and they all have a very positive response to it. So that, I think, is going to blow people away. And I think I've got an agent who's already interested in it once it's completed.
I really don't recommend agents to you.
Well, I'd like to get some kind of mass market publication on this because that way I'll get a much better, much higher profile.
Yeah, it's true for a certain degree, but just make sure you read your contract. I'm sure.
Yes, I'll be very careful about that. My older brother is actually an attorney, and I would have him read any contract that I would get.
Okay, good. Because there's 1 or 2 horror stories that I've pulled out, including one from that Fight Club guy, where an agent made off with a absolutely insane bundle of cash, nearly impoverishing the man. Though, of course, you're not Chuck Palahniuk or whatever, but it's cutthroat out there. Just be careful.
Well, I'm not dead set on it. I mean, if anybody in the audience knows a publisher that would be interested in a humorous high fantasy novel, I certainly would be open to talk.
I mean, I'm sure Jason, maybe, if he hasn't looked at it already.
That may well be one of the people I go to.
Yeah.
I don't have anything pre-set up at the moment.
You still there?
Novel I'm working on, so I'm kind of interested to see what I can do with it as well.
Excellent. And it's one of those things where, of course, do whatever seems right to you, but it's just, I'm not a big name in any sort of way, but even that's intimidating to me, what I see coming out there. But humor is its own thing. It's its own genre. Uh, Not the same as action or anything like that, because it's all in the jokes are the main thrust of it, rather than maybe having some jokes on the side. Is there any high fantasy comedies that you've read before or that you enjoy?
Robert Asprin. He wrote Myth Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Some Terry Pratchett. I haven't read the whole series, but I've read some of the Color of Magic series. I've read some of Piers Anthony's Xanth series.
I do find the Colors of Magic quite funny. Um, what's that one joke where there's this robot, copper robot who Golem or something. He's roaming around, and he's an atheist, and he's very skeptical of magic. And so at one point he horrifyingly blasphemes the gods, and is immediately struck by lightning. And his reply is, "That doesn't constitute an argument," which I found quite funny when I heard that. There's also a character is essentially standing on top of a mountain in a lightning storm, wearing it's a different character, wearing a suit of copper armor, screaming, "All gods are bastards." Talking about this happy-go-lucky character who seems to, every step he takes, fall into a new and stranger scrape. Though I will say that the humor in those books, while delightful when it's delightful, are sometimes too strange for me. Like when they had that one book about the pyramids and mathematics, which I'm sure was funny if I understood the mathematics, but I could not. Just promise me there won't be any mathematics in this book.
Well, the only mathematics is in the title of the book, 28 Minutes into the Future.
It's too much already.
28 is considered a perfect number because it's evenly divisible by 1, 2, 4, 7, and 14. And if you add them all up, it equals 28.
Ooh. Okay.
That's all the math for this book.
All right. You know what? I can take it. I can take this amount of math. So we've been talking for a good 50 to 40 minutes. What do you have any excellent? This has been an excellent time. Do you have any final words for the audience, promoting your book and all that jazz?
Buy a copy and give it to your liberal friends and watch their heads explode.
Oh, I don't recommend that. You know how hard it is to clean it off the carpet?
Do it outdoors or in their house rather than yours.
Hey, I like the cut of your jib. Comedic sociopathy is also one of the highest forms of humor, I'm sure. All right, Chrome Oxide, you have been delightful. I hope in reading this book, my appreciation for written humor grows exponentially. And I wish you every success with every project that you go into.
Thank you very much. And I think, depending upon your sense of humor, I think you'll find something no matter what, because I don't try and focus too narrowly on one specific kind of humor. I have a lot of different things going on.
I like it. Well, thank you for coming. And next week, you'll see us at the Dragon Con, where I'll be taking videos of various, if I can get the sound right. I don't know if I can get the sound right. Oh my goodness. It's a word where people sit at a table and talk about things.
Wow, what a concept.
Right? I know. I just wish I could remember the one English word that's for it. Tables? No?
We're talking about impaneling people?
There we go. That sounds exactly right. Where I will be recording what panels interest me, as well as what panels I am politely asked to and then politely asked to record. I'm not really that big on politeness. Well, all right, guys. Have a great night. See you next week.